It's important, as I interpret the sayings of Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas, it's important to understand, to all you listeners, that unless you are of a certain spiritual maturity level, these interpretations will not likely resonate with you. However, you may still get something out of these interpretations by listening to them. As with all conscious thought, we must be at that level of consciousness for these thoughts to resonate with us. If we are not at that level of understanding, we don't vibe with what the speaker is saying. We don't see the world as the speaker sees it. There is no right or wrong. You're not wrong and I'm not right. It's simply a different interpretation for a different level of understanding. And if you find that these interpretations do not vibe with you, you are quite likely not ready for this level of understanding, but you're on your way. And eventually you will see it as I have seen it. Eventually you will be at my spiritual level. And you will see the world, through your consciousness as I see it. And you will vibe with my vibe. And you will accept the things that I am saying. I often find myself reading scriptures, and I've read many over the years, and many times over and over again, some of them. I thought it's fitting to open this channel with my interpretation and a reading of the Gospel of Thomas. The Gospel of Thomas is comprised of 113 sayings, supposedly of Jesus, and it might be interesting introduction for people coming to this channel to quickly get to know where my mind is at by reviewing my interpretation of the sayings of Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas. So let's start this read and interpretation of the Gospel of Thomas. These are the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke, which Didymus, Judas, Thomas wrote down. Number 1, Jesus says, and he said, whoever finds the interpretation of these sayings will not experience death. That doesn't sound like it says much, but as you will see as we go on, that statement of Jesus makes a huge impact. Because if we don't understand his words, the interpretation of what he's saying, then we do not know him. For if we know anyone, we have a pretty good idea of where their head's at. Well, if we knew Jesus, we'd also understand the interpretation of his sayings. If we do not understand, then it is only because we do not know him. Saying number 2, Jesus said, let him who seeks continue seeking until he finds. When he finds, he will be troubled. When he becomes troubled, he will be astonished, and he will rule over all. Here Jesus is simply warning that you must continue to seek until you find. Even in the standard Christian Bible and many other sacred scripture books for other religions as well, it is stated that you must seek and seek and seek until you find. If your heart is not in spending due diligence to seek and seek and seek until you find, then you're not likely ready for the kingdom. Now Jesus says, those who seek until they find, when they find, they will become troubled. The seeker will become troubled because the true meaning of spirituality is not what is taught by the basic teachings in the churches of the land. To become spiritual means to lose your animal nature. It means to ascend to a higher level of consciousness where one is not imprisoned by the senses of the physical body. If one is able to transcend or overcome, rise above the senses of the physical body, one then becomes spiritual and has the animal body under their control. But this is troubling when one has lived in this body all your life and been motivated by the will of the senses of this body, this physical body. It is troubling when you rise above that and no longer are motivated to do what the senses of your physical body desire for you to do. This is troubling. But when you become troubled, as Jesus says, you become astonished at the truth that you can actually rise above the limiting senses of the physical body. You can be in control rather than allowing the senses of your physical body control you. And this is what it's meant, where Jesus says, once you discover this, you will rule over all, rather than having the senses of your physical form rule over you and dictate to you how you should do things and what you should do. When you rise above the level of the senses of the body, when you're no longer controlled by the animal instinct, when you are truly spiritual, you are in control of the senses of the body. They are no longer controlling you. This is where Jesus says you are empowered. This is the power of God. By rising above your animal instinct, you are given the ability to rule over all. Saying number 3, Jesus said, if those who lead you say to you, see, the kingdom is in the sky, then the birds of the sky shall precede you. If they say to you, it is in the sea, then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you, where you come to know yourselves. When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known, and you will realize that it is you who are the sons of the living Father. But if you will not know yourselves, you dwell in poverty, and it is you who are that poverty. This is a very powerful saying from Jesus. If we look at, he says, if those who lead you, This means your thoughts. If you have thoughts, we are all ruled by our own thoughts. It is no other person out there that's leading you. It's your own thoughts that lead you. And if your thoughts are telling you that the kingdom of heaven is in the sky, then you're not going to make it to the kingdom. If those thoughts that lead you tell you that the kingdom is in the sea, meaning the deeper carnal doctrine. If you look at the Holy Scriptures, namely for reference purposes, we'll use the Christian Holy Scriptures, there is doctrines that are used and analyzed with the sea. The land is a certain headspace. The land carries certain attributes which are dictated as carnal thoughts. And the sea also is a deeper level of carnal thoughts. So they are better than the carnal understandings that you receive on the land, in the houses, in the cities of the land, in the lakes and the streams and the brooks and the rivers of the land. The sea has deeper doctrine. The sea has deeper secrets, but still carnal, nonetheless not spiritual. Maybe verging on spiritual, but not entirely spiritual. So some people, they have these thoughts that exist within the sea of deeper doctrine. And they are bound to their thoughts, thinking, this is heaven. These thoughts are certainly spiritual, of heaven. Jesus is saying, if you think heaven is in that sea of doctrine, then the fish will precede you. I will tell you that in the end, much of the doctrine of the sea is converted from carnal to spiritual understanding for you. Much of it, but not all of it. And no, the kingdom is not in the sea. You must rise above it, as you find out in the end the sea is dried up. The sea of doctrine is dried up. So Jesus says, if you believe that the kingdom of heaven is in the sea, then the fish, which are thoughts and understandings at a deeper level, those fish will precede you in reaching the kingdom. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you, and it's outside of you. It's actually all around you, and this is your energy. This is your aura. We all have a certain aura, and that aura is the energy that permeates our physical body. It's known as conscious energy, but that energy draws thoughts to us. Many of you have heard of maybe the collective consciousness. There seems to be consciousness collectively that streams through the air that many people receive thoughts from. This is why it's not a mystery that you may have a thought to invent a new item, but before you can put it into reality, you see somebody else already came up with that thought clear across the globe. That's because they received that same thought as you did. Where did they get it from? They got it from the collective consciousness. Now, so we get our spiritual understandings from this collective consciousness, this energy known as the aura that envelopes our and permeates our physical being, known as conscious energy. And it is this conscious energy that we have to rise up above the collective consciousness to a higher level, to the level of Christ, which is referred to often as Christ consciousness. We rise our energy up. We do that by denying ourselves the senses, the lusts and desires of the senses of the animal body. We rise up our level of consciousness by denying ourself being the ruler of the physical body that is led by the 5 senses of the physical body. We deny these senses, and as we do, we begin to die to ourselves, and we rise up to a higher level of consciousness. This is what Jesus means in the Gospel of Thomas in saying number 3, is that the kingdom is within you and outside of you. It's actually all around you. It's the energy that envelopes you, known as your aura. But for most people on this planet, it is a lower energy below the kingdom of heaven. And by denying the senses of the body that make up the self, you can ascend to a higher level of consciousness, as Jesus said in saying number 2, that you will begin to rule over all. But if you rise up to a higher level of consciousness, you will no longer feed off of the collective consciousness. Your conscious energy will feed off of God consciousness. There are many higher levels of consciousness, but we, for the most part, in human animal bodies, are trapped below the energy level of Christ, below the energy level of God, often referred to as darkness. We have energy, but it's vibrating at a grosser level, and it's below heavenly energy. And this means that the thoughts that come to us through this collective consciousness are thoughts which are lower than the thoughts that come to us when we ascend up to the higher heavenly levels of consciousness, known as Christ consciousness or God consciousness. So this is simply what Jesus is saying, is that the kingdom is inside of you. It's your energy. It's outside of you. It's your energy. It's your conscious energy. It creates the aura around you. But you must raise that up. You must raise that energy up to the Christ level. And you do that by denying the lusts and desires of the senses of the animal, the physical body. When you come to know yourselves, when you know that you are not your body, when you know that you can rise your consciousness up above the level of the physical animal body, when you know that you are not your body, then you will ascend into the heavenly level of consciousness where God will know you, where you will become known, and you will realize that it is your thoughts, it is you, the thoughts you have in your consciousness that are the suns, the understandings. Okay, suns are understandings, not these animal bodies, not you as a physical form. Your consciousness filled with understandings of the spiritual level. These are the sons of God, and your consciousness is made up of many thoughts. Each one, if you're at a spiritual level, each one being the Son of God, an understanding from God. And there are thousands, millions. But if you will not come to know yourself, if you will not come to realize that you are not your body and rise up above that body and be able to control the instincts, the animal instinct, the senses of your physical body, if you will not do that, then you dwell in poverty. You do not have the wealth, the riches of this understanding. And it is you who are that poverty. Saying number 4. Gospel of Thomas, saying number 4. Jesus said, "The man old in days will not hesitate to ask a child 7 days old about the place of life, and he will live. For many who are first will become last, and they will become one and the same." It is written in Hebrews, in the Christian Holy Scriptures, Hebrews 6, that it is appointed unto all men once to die, and then the judgment. What Jesus is saying here is a man from the dark realm of consciousness, a man who has dark understanding of God, but high as you can go before you reach into the heavenly light, a man who has ascended almost into the kingdom of heaven, but is not accepted there because of the darkness he retains in his consciousness. That man will ask a child of God. That's a spiritual understanding that has just come forth. That man full of days, that old ancient understanding from the dark realm of what God is, will ask a child of God, a spiritual understanding, only 7 days old, will say, "What way do I get to the kingdom?" The place of life. You see, God is love. God is light. God is life. The kingdom of heaven is life. So this man full of days will ask the spiritual understanding of God from the light, which way to the kingdom? And he will be told it's appointed unto all men once to die. Die to what? Man is an understanding, a carnal understanding at a higher level, but man cannot enter the kingdom. Man can only go so high, and then that understanding, because it is carnal, it was created in darkness, it must die. And when that understanding dies, it is born again. Spiritual understanding. This is why it is said that you brought nothing into this world and you can take nothing out of this world. You came from heaven into this world. You descended as a spark from the divine into this lower animal body to have a physical experience. But you came in as a pure being, and you've become corrupted over the years and over the lifetimes by your experiences. But now you've naturally evolved back up to where it's time to consider entering heaven again and leaving the physical spirit, leaving the physical conscious realm and the physical form. But to do that, you can take nothing of your understanding, nothing that came from the dark understanding that was created about God outside of the light of God. You can take none of that with you back into the light, for the understandings are too low. So therefore, a man full of days, that's an understanding that came from the dark conscious level, must give up what he knows. You must take what you know or think you know and get rid of it and become like a child again. and thus is the way you will enter the kingdom. This is why it is appointed to all men once to die. It's appointed to all your darkened understandings of God to die. To each man in their own time, one understanding after another. One is ready to die. It can die and ascend into the light. It can be converted from a carnal, dark understanding of God to a spiritual understanding in the light. And then the next understanding and the next understanding. God is progressive. Each man in his own order, each understanding in their own order. It says in Hebrews that it is appointed unto men once to die and then the judgment. Well, Christ is the light of God that judges. And it is said in the Gospel of John that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. This is why your darkened understanding cannot enter the light. And Christ is the light of God that will judge that. If you try to bring your darkened carnal understanding into the light of Christ, you will burn. It's too low. The energy meshes like the two poles on a battery. If you cross the positive and the negative, the light with the darkness, you get sparks. You cannot take anything out of the conscious dark realm into the spiritual realm. You must die to what you know or think you know. And this is why Jesus says that a man full of days will ask a child 7 days old about the place of life, and he will live. For many who were first will become last. What Jesus is getting at is you've had some old beliefs and understandings of God. Maybe some of you have carried them for 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years. But they are carnal, and they must die so that you can get a higher understanding, a spiritual understanding. So though you've had that understanding for many, many years, a child will precede you, and you will enter. But though you were first in the beginning years ago, you will enter later on after some children enter. Okay, so this is what Jesus is saying in 4. Saying number 5. Jesus said, recognize what is in your sight, and that which is hidden from you will become plain to you. For there is nothing hidden that will not become manifest. What Jesus is saying here is the same thing that the Holy Scriptures have said in the Christian doctrine. God says, to he who has, more will be given. This is the same saying. Recognize what is in front of your eyes or in front of your sight. Recognize, meaning understand what God is telling you or what you know, and do that understanding. And as you do that, that shows that you recognize that understanding because you are doing it. Jesus said that it is who loves me, he does my commandments. So if you love Jesus, you do his saying. This is what it means, recognize what is in your sight. It means to do what you understand. And as you do that, what you don't understand will become apparent to you. It will become exposed to you, just as the Christian doctrine said, to he who has, if you have understanding in something, God will give you a greater understanding. One step at a time. God is progressive. Gospel of Thomas, saying number 6. His disciples questioned him and said to him, Do you want us to fast? How shall we pray? Shall we give alms? What diet shall we observe? Jesus said, do not tell lies. Do not do that which you hate. For all things are plain in the sight of heaven. For nothing hidden will not become manifest, and nothing covered will remain without being uncovered. What Jesus is saying here is do not tell lies. This is your understanding of God. We'll call it carnal because it's formed below the light of God. It's formed in the grosser conscious energy, below the level of heaven, below the understanding of Christ, who is higher. These conceptions, these understandings that are formed are not true. They are lies. So do not tell lies. Do not believe lies. You keep telling yourself these carnal things and you keep believing them, you're not going to ascend. Stop telling yourself lies and stop telling lies to others. Do not do those things which you hate. You know, every one of you knows that we have two voices in us. One is the voice of intellect and logic and rationale that looks after the self, telling us that we must do this because there's great profit in it for us. Even though there's another voice in us that says, that's not right, we shouldn't do that. But the self has the stronger voice, and we do it anyway, even though it's not really what we choose to do. We really hate that we've done this, but we do it because it's to our benefit. Jesus says, do not tell lies, and do not do those things which you hate. Okay? The Spirit in you does not desire to do the lies of the carnal consciousness. It does not desire to do the lower understandings of God. Hate actually means repelled from. Hate means repelled. So when we say do not do those things that you hate, we could say do not do those things that you are repelled from. You find them repulsive. You're not drawn to it, you're drawn away from it. Inside you is a divine spark, and that divinity in you does not like carnal lies, carnal understanding. Now, up till now, we've seemed to find it fit to do such things, but Jesus is telling you that those conceptions of God formed in darkness are carnal. They are lies. Don't do them. The divinity in you is not drawn to them. The divinity in you is repulsed of them. It hates them. So don't do those understandings. Do the higher understandings. But he told you in saying 5 or saying 4, Jesus has told you that if you do higher understandings, then you will become, you will be drawn to higher levels of understanding. To he who has, more will be given. But if we do not do higher things, if we stay believing the lies and acting by the lies, the carnal understanding, the darkened understanding, if we continue this way, then we do not recognize what is in our sight, and more will not be given to us. more understanding will not be revealed to us. So as Jesus says in saying 6, do not tell lies. Do not do that which you hate, for all things are plain in the sight of heaven. This is because the kingdom is inside of you and outside of you and all around you. You just haven't accessed it because your level of thinking is too low. But heaven sees everything because it is all around you. Nothing is hidden that will not be manifest, and nothing covered will remain without being uncovered. Saying number 7, Jesus said, blessed is the lion which becomes man and is consumed by man. And cursed is the man that the lion consumes, and the lion becomes man. What Jesus is saying is that in the scriptures, people familiar know that there are 4 beasts that fall down before the throne of God. Those 4 beasts are the 4 faces of man. The first face being the lion. Now you might know it is written in the Holy Scriptures that Jesus himself was the Lion of Judah. The Lion of Judah is the lawkeeper, one who is under the first covenant of Moses and the laws of the prophets. If you've succeeded in doing what Moses has commanded, you become the Lion of Judah. But that keeping the law is below the level of understanding of Christ. But once you've succeeded in the understandings given by Moses and the prophets, you become the Lion of Judah. But the next step, the next face on the beast of man, is the cattle. Because cattle eat out of the manger where the Christ child is born. So once you've become the Lion of Judah, next you become a cattle and feed your thoughts out of the manger where the Christ child was born. Cattle eat out of the manger. But this saying 7 deals with the lion. So the third step, after you eat out of the manger where the Christ child is born, the third face of the beast is a man. You become a man in God's eyes. Remember, the Lion of Judah was, to the best of his ability, the keepers of the law under the covenant of Moses and the prophets. Then man ascends to eat from the baby Christ child out of the manger. Feed on the thoughts of the infant Christ consciousness. And after you've fed on those thoughts, you ascend a little bit in consciousness to the level of a man. Your thoughts ascend to the level of a man. And those thoughts now being a man, this is what Jesus is talking about in saying 7 of the Gospel of Thomas. Blessed is the lion which becomes man. Okay, that's how the lion becomes man. The lion is the successful accomplisher of the covenant of Moses and the prophets, known as the law of Moses and the prophets. No man kept it perfectly, and therefore no man was accepted by God. But you must go through that. Then, when Moses and the prophets have nothing more for you, you're introduced to the Christ child, which is the very beginning of Christ consciousness. And as a cattle, you eat in the manger where the Christ child is born. You eat up the food, the thoughts that come to you from the babe of the light of Christ consciousness. And after you eat that for a while, you become a man. And Jesus says in saying 7, blessed is the lion which becomes man. This is how the Lion of Judah becomes a man in God's eyes. But Blessed is the lion that becomes man when consumed by man. And cursed is the man whom the lion consumes. Now this is a man who has eaten out of the Christ manger and ascended to the level of man, but then turned back to the law. Turned back to the law of Moses. This is how the lion consumes the man, and the lion becomes a man. When a man is created, that is an understanding of God at the level of a man. Once that is created, it must continue to rise upwards, not turn and go back down to the law of Moses and the prophets. It must continue upwards. If that understanding goes back down, turns his eyes and looks for understanding in the law, the one thing he ascended and rose above, if he begins to look back down again, that understanding becomes cursed. This is why Jesus was above the law, and that man is ascending above the law and must continue ascending above the law, not turn back to the law. Gospel of Thomas, saying number 8. And Jesus said, the man is like a wise fisherman who cast his net into the sea and drew it up from the sea full of small fish. Remember, among them was the wise fisherman found a fine large fish. He threw all the other fish back into the sea and chose the large fish without difficulty. Whoever has ears to hear, let him hear. In saying 8 in the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus is saying that a man, this is the person that ascended, this is the understanding that ascended above the law of Moses, the Lion of Judah, and became a cattle, eating in the manger where the Christ child was born. And after some time of eating with the Christ child, he becomes a man. He ascends to the level of consciousness that God claims to be suitable for a man. Now this man was fishing in the sea, which is still below heaven, but he was fishing in the sea. And he caught many small fish. These are little tidbits of good understanding of the carnal doctrine. But he found a large fish among all the little ones. That's a little bit better. That's a little bit better carnal understanding, the big fish. So he threw all the small fish back and took the big fish. He took the greater understanding and got rid of all the others. Now, he did it without difficulty. What Jesus is telling you here is that we often get little understandings about what God expects from us. And then, most of us have had a bigger understanding. From time to time, we've had a huge understanding come to us, but we've thought, oh, that's too much. I can't do that. The cost is too great. I couldn't do that. I must be understanding this wrong. This can't be what God is saying. Why would God want to do this to me? What Jesus is telling you is at the level of man, which is the third face of the beast that stands before the throne of God. At the level of man, Jesus is saying that you have the strength, the confidence in your relationship, in your Christian understanding, in your understanding of God. At this level, a man is able to choose the difficult understandings, the big understanding, the big fish. You can choose that without difficulty and throw all the other little ones back. Until we are ready, Jesus is saying, until you are ready to do the difficult things of God, then your understanding is below the level of a man in God's eyes. You are still controlled by the senses, your lusts and your desires, which are keeping you from choosing the big fish. And therefore, you're not a man in God's eyes. When you are able to control the lusts and desires of the five senses of the physical body, you're a man in God's eyes. The understanding is at the level of a man in God's eyes. I don't believe we should make these videos too long for one sitting. So I think 45 minutes to an hour is probably long enough for a video. So I will split these interpretations, the 113 of them, into shorter videos for your convenience. So if you wish to hear a longer video, you'll have to watch the second part and the third part and so on until you get through the interpretation videos of all the 113 sayings in the complete Gospel of Thomas.